Pacers lose a wild overtime game to the Chicago Bulls. So many moments in this game, so many controversial things and decisions to talk about. Did the Pacers play it right? Why did they lose? Myles Turner was awesome. And standings watch all coming on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Happy Thursday, y'all, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, do we have a doozy of a game to talk about. Pacers lose to the Bulls. I mean, it's just out of stuff to say about this team. They can beat anybody, and they can lose to anybody. We know that. It's not worth diving into that part of it. What is worth diving into is crazy game. Pacers lead late. They blow it on the last defensive possession on a controversial decision to foul DeMar DeRozan before he takes a three. We'll dig into that. We'll dig into their overtime execution, their final possession there. We're going to break out some calculators and talk about math and why I think the Pacers just lost an odds game late in this game. We're going to talk about Pascal Siakam, some plays that should have been leading this show as highlights, and of course, looking at the standings. What an eventful night in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Pacers Bulls. Pacers lose by 3 in overtime, their first overtime game of the season. The headline on Locked On Bulls is going to be all about DeMar DeRozan, who was insane with 46 points and several just unbelievable shots. But the highlight for the Pacers and the discussion around the Pacers, and of course my mentions on social media, is about the very last defensive play of regulation. I have to set the scene so you guys understand where I'm coming from, and then we're going to do some math, and we're going to make it not boring, I promise. So here's the deal. Pacers were down in the final 2 minutes. Myles Turner comes in the game and changes everything. He was brilliant in the final stretch of this fourth quarter. I hate that I don't have to get to lead with Myles Turner today. He earned it. He played fantastic. So he hits a three to tie the game with 1:21 to go. Myles Turner hits a three to give the Pacers the lead with 57 seconds to go. And the Pacers have the ball with about 30 seconds to go. They miss 2 shots, up by 1 after a DeRozan bucket. So the Bulls have the ball. The Pacers get the stop they need on a crazy Siakam block, which also would have been a good lead for this episode. To save the Pacers lead with 10 seconds to go, Nesmith hits 2 free throws, 6 seconds left. Pacers up 117-114, on the verge of putting this game away. And then comes the controversy, or the common buzz right now of the Pacers internet space. Up by 3 with 6 seconds to go. That's a decent amount of time, but not a lot. The Pacers opt to foul. We will get into who fouled in a second, because that is the biggest sin of all of this to me. The Pacers opt to foul. They foul DeMar DeRozan before he takes a three, the thinking being, if the Bulls can't take a three, they cannot tie the game with a three. And they then have to do something gimmicky at the foul line, or do something gimmicky to get the ball back, or the Pacers have to mess up themselves to lose, right? They fouled. DeRozan goes to the foul line. He's a great free throw shooter. He hit the first. The second one, really nice touch. He missed the second. Obi Toppin gets up and gets a hand on it, but can't secure it. Tips it into space, not towards any Bulls players. Smart, but out of bounds, not smart. And so the Bulls get the last shot of the game. Now down by 2 instead of 3, they can't foul. And DeRozan hits a beautiful 19-foot baseline fadeaway to tie the game. The Bulls win in overtime. There's another controversial overtime thing we have to talk about in a second. So on the last possession, instead of letting the Bulls take a three, the Pacers opted to foul and hope that the math worked out in their favor after that foul. So here's why they made that decision, right? I would have done the same thing as the coach of the Pacers, and I would have been wrong. They lost, right? They were wrong. Let me be clear. You're allowed to be critical when things don't go right, even if you would have made the same decision. When a player shoots a wide open shot and misses, you're allowed to be critical because they missed, even if it's a good shot. So what the Pacers were deciding between in that moment, DeMar DeRozan this season, 34% three-point shooter, 34.1%. So if they let him not let him, air quotes on let him, but if they contest a three and they have to be careful not to foul on that three, right, there's a 34% chance the game goes to overtime. He actually, they fouled in like 2 seconds, right? So the shot would have gone up with like 3.5 seconds to go. It essentially would have ended the game, maybe like a little under a second to go. Okay, so pretend they did that. That's a 34% chance of overtime, maybe a little bit less, or excuse me, less than that, a little smaller chance of overtime. If you say maybe the Pacers could have scored with 0.7 to go, whatever. Okay, the other option is what they did, which is foul, have DeRozan make one, miss the second, get the rebound, and they score. It could have been he missed it, and then a rebound, and then a three, but then you go back to that 34%, and their odds are even lower because he misses the free throw. So going on the most positive possible odds for this, DeMar DeRozan from the right mid-range corner, 19-foot-ish from that spot. StatMuse has it really broken out with their shot charts. He's 11 for 20 from that space this season. That's 55%, right? That's a good percentage. He has to make the free throw to set up that mid-range shot. He's an 86.3% free throw shooter. And then to actually get the chance to shoot both the free throw and the mid-range shot, the Bulls have to get the offensive rebound or get possession of the ball after the free throw. And the Pacers brought in a bunch of rebounders, but let's just generically use the Pacers' defensive rebound rate this season, which is 74.2%. So for the Bulls to win, or send this game to overtime, the route the Pacers chose, it would require a 55% event, DeRozan making the shot, an 86.3% event, DeRozan making the free throw, and a 25.8% event, the Bulls securing the rebound. All three of those things happening is a 12.2% chance. So what makes more sense for the Pacers? To travel down the path with a 12.2% chance of overtime, or to travel down the path with a 34% chance of overtime? Obviously, you pick the 12.2%, but they messed up the execution, and there were some sins along the way that make it not just as simple as math, right? Math is a way to go with this, and that's why I did it that way. I'm a numbers guy. And again, I would have done it that way myself. I also would have lost the game. It's just how the context has to be talked about. So the biggest sin of the play, and I want to know more about this. I had asked Rick Carlisle very generically about his team's execution down the stretch of this game and their defense on DeRozan. I didn't get a chance to ask a third question, but this would have been it. So the player that fouled DeMar DeRozan with 3 seconds left in the game was Aaron Nesmith. Aaron Nesmith at the time had 5 fouls. That was his 6th foul of the game. He fouled out in that moment. So now if this 12% event happens, which it did, Nesmith is not available for overtime. Other players could have fouled him. Maybe Nembhard, maybe a big, who knows? Someone else, right? That was the biggest misplay the Pacers had in that moment. And so I get having Nesmith on him to, make it harder for him to get open or make it, all sorts of that kind of stuff. But once he catches the ball, Nesmith cannot be the one to foul him. And so if your intent as the Pacers is foul right away, someone else should have been on DeRozan. That's the sin number one, right? Problems with my math here. One would be they don't know where DeRozan is shooting from when they're calculating the percent chance that the game is tied, but he shot from a good zone. They also don't know that the first free throw goes in when they're making these decisions, but they put in a lot of rebounders. So maybe you could say, well, their actual defensive rebound rate would be higher. Toppin was in, I think Jalen Smith was in, and Myles Turner were all in, right? Because they want to grab 2 hands of defensive rebound. I look down at Mike Weiner on the bench. He's holding up 2 hands. Grab it. Obi Toppin can't because Vucevic is in his way. He can get a hand to it. He can't get both to it because he's running into somebody else. Credit to Vooch for that. So Toppin, this is sin number 2, and I kind of can't blame him. I kind of can. It looks like on the replay he had enough of a hand under it to kind of guide where it was going, but you can't tip it right to a Bulls player. That's disaster. That's an open shot instead of a contested shot that they got. He tipped it out of bounds, right? If he could have tipped it behind him or even up, straight up in the air, that could have been a way the Pacers won this game late. It's really hard to think that way in a moment like that. But that would be sin number 2. 1, Nesmith foul. 2, they can't execute on the rebound. They basically did the second worst thing behind just tipping it right to the Bulls. They didn't get it. The actual problem is they didn't get the rebound. And sin 3 was the inbounds pass. Nesmith's fouled out, so they have to sub somebody in, especially after the rebound goes out on the side. In comes T.J. McConnell. T.J. McConnell ends up being the guy guarding DeMar DeRozan. So on one hand, he's taking a fadeaway, high-pressure mid-range shot at the buzzer. On the other hand, he's shooting it over a 6-foot-tall guy, right? So that's sin number 3 to me, is having a shorter, even if McConnell's a pesky defender, having a shorter guy on him makes it tougher. He drills it. If you watch the replay, Tyrese Haliburton's kind of angled in a way on the inbounds to prevent the inbounds from going to a three-point shooter. Again, you can't lose in regulation that way, but it allowed the inbounds to go where it was. DeRozan was unbelievable. He made some insane shots in this game. You can throw out some of the default percentages I gave and up a lot of them. To get from 12% to 34% is hard, right? I think that the Pacers made the right decision but it didn't work. That's still something that you can say, oh, well, the result matters in the end, right? And so that's the first key decision that went wrong for the Pacers. There's another one. Oh, no, by the way, if you wanted to say, well, DeRozan was 1 for 6 from 3 in this game, 16% is still higher than 12%. So I actually think the Pacers made the right call to say that's the strategy we want to live with, but the results weren't there. And you can go back to last year, if you'll remember, Pacers Bulls in Chicago, March 5th, 2023. Tyrese Haliburton hits a huge 3 over Patrick Beverley. Pacers lead by 3 with 2 seconds to go. Bulls inbound to Vucevic. Pacers don't foul. Vuce gets the open 3. And he missed it, right? That's scary. The ball's in the air. The result of that one was the Pacers gave up a 35% chance at overtime right then in that moment, and they won, right? They can say, well, it worked out, right? This time they cannot say it worked out. They lost the game. I think that there's probably a million holes you can poke in my assumptions. I tried to type out a lot of them. But the biggest thing that happened wrong in that moment to me was Aaron Nesmith was the player making the foul. I wish I could ask Nesmith or Rick Carlisle about it. I should have led with that. I had other questions to get to first, but that is why this game went to overtime. That is why the Pacers did what they did at the end of the game, and it played a big part in their losing. And you know what else did? Some stuff that happened at overtime. So much more to talk about from Pacers Bulls coming up. The last play of the game, no timeout. Give Siakam the ball. Plenty more coming in just a moment. But first, we have to talk about Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. The easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. You just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. It's demon time on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into 1,000 demons and goblins with the newest and most exciting way to play at Prize Picks. Squares marked with red demons or green goblins get you different payouts. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, enormous selection of players and stats are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Steph Curry, more than or less than 29 points. Anthony Davis, more than or less than 2 blocks. That's the gist of what you do every single day. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA. You'll get a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100 at Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Whew, got lots of energy. Thanks for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Bulls. They got to be talking about DeRozan. He was incredible. We'll talk about that a little bit in this second segment, among many other things, including the Pacers' last possession. More last possession drama. Pacers' last two home games have ended with some last possession drama. Final shot in this game. The Pacers, once again, go no timeout on the last possession. So here, if you'll remember, they played Minnesota at home a week ago, and they got a transition leak out. Aaron Nesmith breaks ahead. Unreal athletic play from Anthony Edwards, steals the play. And I said, and I still stand by this, I would not have called timeout there. They got a great transition opportunity, a layup that looks like a chance behind the defense, and Edwards just comes out of nowhere. This time, I might have called timeout. I don't know. The Bulls missed DeRozan missed a free throw unintentionally this time. With 9 seconds to go, Myles Turner gets the rebound. Pacers go no timeout. Nembhard pushes up. They get it to Haliburton. They flow into a dribble handoff with Myles Turner, and Caruso's just all over it. So it's a really tough shot for Haliburton. He kind of double clutches, doesn't even hit the rim. The last shot, should they have called timeout? I'd say yes this time because they didn't have the obvious transition chance to score right away, and Haliburton wasn't the guy taking it up the floor. Andrew Nembhard got it up the floor. Nembhard didn't do anything wrong right in that moment. We'll talk about him in just a second, but I think that is partially a difference from the Minnesota game. Is I would call timeout this time. They had more time. They didn't have the same advantages. The Bulls have some good defenders on the floor already. Caruso blew up the play. I might have called timeout. In that instance, Haliburton's shot was not there. The sins of that play, no contact on the screen from Turner, so just Caruso just flows right into it. Nembhard spaces out to half court to try to get out of the way, but I think it was Ayo Dosunmu who was on him, and he's like, okay, I'm not guarding you out there, and he just drifts over and is right by the DHOs. There's 3 defenders there. That one merited a timeout to me in a way that didn't. One more sin from the end of regulation. One of Andrew Nembhard's threes. He took 2 threes with the Pacers up by 3 on their Pacers' final offensive possession. One was late in the shot clock. That one was fine. It was pretty open. The other one, there was about 7 on the shot clock and a contesting defender. It felt too early, right? Maybe take a little more time there. But what happened after that play is Kobe Wright ran ahead in transition, and Pascal Siakam had an insane block. This is in the same 90-second period that Myles Turner hit 2 unreal threes, and Turner hit 2 more huge threes in overtime. Those guys should have merited more discussion here, but it doesn't happen because the Pacers had a lot of stuff go wrong in the final minutes of this game. I think they executed a lot of stuff pretty well in the overtimes, but not enough. Not on the last possessions of either the fourth quarter or overtime, and they couldn't stop DeRozan. That's something else I want to get in here before we talk about a couple other minor things, at least for me, that stood out from this game. DeMar DeRozan was unbelievable. 9 points in just the overtime, 46 on the night on 24 shots, 17 free throws, much to the annoyance of many fans. He was foul baiting like crazy, but if you can do it, do it. You know, if that's the kind of fouls the refs are calling in that game, you should do that if you're capable of doing it. It's terrible for the Pacers. It sucks and it's harder to guard, but he's smart to do that. It was impressive. He took 17 free throws. The Pacers took 28. But he hit a lot of jumpers too. 15 made shots, 14 twos. Right? He did do a ton of fantastic stuff and was plus 18 on the night. He was unbelievably good to the point that the Pacers started double teaming him. Right? And that is where I think some of their execution stuff comes into play. The Bulls got a lot of layups out of that. And that is to be expected, right? Someone's open on purpose, but the Pacers have to rotate really well out of those double teams, and they weren't quite doing that enough. And, like Alex Caruso punished them. Alex Caruso, 23 points. He was awesome. 5 for 6 from deep, right? He did really well. Ayo Dosunmu was efficient from the field, right? So DeRozan was the engine for the Bulls in this game. Is there a curse with DeRozan in Gainbridge Fieldhouse? He had that half-court shot on New Year's Eve a few years ago. But he was just unbelievable. Pacers really struggled with answers for him before he even made the late plays that turned this game. Okay, a couple other things I want to say about really the big three for the Pacers, their best 3 players. Number 1, Myles Turner. Let's get a positive in here. Myles Turner was awesome again. 27 points. His defense was good enough. He had 7 rebounds, 9 for 15 from the field, 5 threes, 4 of them were massive. The Pacers stunk it up from 3 tonight. They missed a bunch of open threes. Turner and Nesmith were the only guys who really got consistently rolling from deep, especially in the fourth quarter. And Turner's were all huge shots in a huge moment where he made the defense think about how to guard him or think about how to guard who he was screening for. He was awesome. If anything, I think he should have been in more late in the game. They had Obi Toppin out there instead of Turner for some of the stretch run. Turner was really great. His clutch shots were massive. If they had won the game, his late game shooting would have been a key part of the story of getting it done. Pascal Siakam had the defensive highlight of the season for the Pacers, because they lost, but he ran back on defense and had a chase down block on Kobe White that set up the Pacers going up from up 1 to up 3 in the final 10 seconds of the game. He was 8 for 12 from the field, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks. Right? A lot of the starters for the Pacers had negative plus minuses. Siakam's was even because when he played with the bench, it went very well. He played very well. The Bulls, in particular, don't have like a 4-man to kind of guard him, right? Caruso was on Haliburton. The rest of their starters were DeRozan, Vucevic, Dosunmu, and Kobe White. And off the bench, they had Onyeal Biddum, Torrey Craig, who can kind of defend 4s, Julian Phillips, a rookie, Andre Drummond can't defend 4s, Dalen Terry can't defend 4s. So Siakam had a lot of advantages. And he only took 12 shots, the least of any starter in this game. He played 36 minutes. Only Haliburton played more. Get Siakam the ball. Pass Pascal Siakam the ball. You've seen him have success in recent games as the Pacers. They were doing a good job, as I just talked about on the show, finding him on mismatches when he would get a small switched onto him. He was punishing those. He was 8 for 12 in this game. He did a lot of good stuff on both ends. He got his offensive rebounds. Pass Pascal Siakam the ball. The Pacers. He is a good player. He does a lot of productive things with his touches. I'm sure there was a reason they weren't going to him as much as I thought they should have, but it sure seemed like that was something they should have done more, is gone to their star forward. Last thing, it's going to happen. I really believe it's going to, right? We have enough track record of this being a thing. Tyrese Haliburton's just got to make his threes. 1 for 6 in this game. One of them didn't hit the rim. And I know he knows it. At some point, it's in his own head. And this is the same thing I said with Buddy Hield. He can't stop taking them, right? The Pacers at one point, I think, were 4 of almost 30 from 3 in this game. They got going late from deep. But they had a couple possessions where they would catch and have a decently open three, and they would shot fake because they weren't making their threes. They want to get out of that funk. And for some players, that's the smart decision on some nights where if they're streakier, that's the case. Haliburton's game, the three's a huge part of it. Guys run him off the line so he can get to the floater, or he can pass from deep, or guys have to sit out farther when they switch onto him so they can contest if he shoots from deep. 1 for 6 in this one. Since the All-Star break, entering tonight, I just talked about this with Tyler Smith, but still, 24.3% entering this game. That number is now lower since the All-Star break. He's still doing well on his twos, right? Almost every game, he's over 50% on his twos. He's doing well inside the arc tonight. He was 5 for 7 inside the arc. That's great. He got to the foul line 4 times. He had 14 assists. A lot of other Tyrese Haliburton stuff is happening at the level it needs to. The threes need to go in. And I don't know what adjustment, if anything, he needs to make it happen, but it's changed his effectiveness from, wow, amazing player, to really good, but not at that kind of level player. If he made some more threes, if the Pacers executed a little better down the stretch, if they found an answer for DeRozan, all sorts of little things, they would have won this game. But they didn't. None of that happened. They're 37-30, and they're back in play-in positioning in the East. That's where we close today. The only time we can fit in standings watch on this show after a loss. Perhaps a better time to do it to illustrate how important every single game is for the Pacers down the stretch. Let's look around at the East standings. Pacers still have to think now about the race behind them. Here come the Bulls. 6-4 in their last 10 games. 9 is still a thing to think about now. As I mentioned yesterday, it would not have been, I think, had the Pacers won. Let's close out today's show with Standings Watch, looking at what's going on around the Pacers in the standings. But first, let's talk about Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Well, Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now, through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right. No cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. Now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold. For 1 year from the date of the first 3% match, must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. And we are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Check out Locked On Magic for your second listen. The Magic, one of the rare teams in this segment we're about to talk about, that won on Wednesday night. I forgot what day it was. There for a second. Pacers back in 7th, sort of, now with their loss to the Chicago Bulls. Here's what has happened. The Magic are taking care of business with their easy schedule. The Knicks got OG Anunoby back, and the Sixers have found some stuff a little bit better. If you haven't been able to keep up with all these teams, I don't blame you. Here's the current situation the Pacers are staring at, right? They are at 7th in the East with 37-30. The Knicks have 38 wins, one more than the Pacers, but they have 27 losses. Granted, as you can see, they've played 2 fewer games than the Pacers, but they're also 2 games ahead in the standings, and notably, just got OG Anunoby back from injury. The Knicks are 13-2 with Anunoby and a 500 team without him. I have a feeling they're about to surge and cement their spot as the fourth best team in the East. Anunoby's on-off numbers are insane. We'll see if that actually happens, but the chance to catch them, they got a few wins. Well, they were really banged up. Brunson didn't need to be out as long as it looked like at first. I think the Knicks are about to be hard to catch in this standings race. We'll see if I'm right. They did just beat the Sixers by quite a bit the other night with Anunoby back in the lineup. The Magic, 38-28. Pacers just beat them. Again, 1 more win than the Pacers, 2 fewer losses. That's a game and a half difference in the standings. I should have said this. Knicks, Pacers own the tiebreaker head-to-head over the New York Knicks. Magic at 38-28 own the tiebreaker over the Pacers right now and have a 1.5 game advantage. 6th place now is the Sixers, who are 39-29, fewer wins than the Pacers, but also fewer losses, so they've played 2 fewer games. They are 4-6 in their last 10 games, just one worse than the Pacers. Who knows when Joel Embiid returns? That is the key thing to note with the Sixers and where the Pacers stand in relation to the standings with them. Technically, as you can look, if you look at the standings, they're both the same number of games back of first place in the East at 15 games back. Right now, the percentage points favor the Sixers, but if the Sixers go 1-1 in their next 2 games, the Pacers would catch them and be back in 6th. So the Pacers, in theory, tied for 6th, but sort of out of their hands if they're actually 6th right now. And then 8th is the Heat, who have lost 4 in a row. They lost to the Nuggets tonight. That's not a big deal. The Heat schedule gets easy. But losing 4 in a row certainly hurts. They are a game behind the Pacers right now with that tiebreaker undecided. They're 35-30. So their game behind the Pacers is just that they've played 2 less. They could win both of those and tie it up. As you can see, 3 games separate 4th and 8th, right? Every week this is going to fluctuate wildly. Pacers went from 8th to 6th to 7th just in the last week since the last standings watch. But the Pacers played some tough games. They played a good Orlando team. They played a good Dallas team. They played an okay Bulls team. And they played a very good record-wise Thunder team in that stretch, right? So their strength of schedule has changed. But hear me out. This is it. You just heard me say it for the last time. The Pacers' strength of schedule is no longer relevant. It is no longer something that needs to be talked about at all for the rest of the season. Here's why. I think you all know this, but I just need to read it so you understand. The Pacers right now are 20-18 against teams 500 and above. In the Eastern Conference, the only other teams with more than 20 wins against that group is Milwaukee and Boston, the top 2 teams in the conference. Everybody else has a losing record in those games, right? Pacers very good against the best teams. They're also 17-12 against teams below 500. The only other team in either the East or the West with 10 or more losses against below 500 teams is the Hawks. Every other team in a playoff or play-in positioning has less than 10 losses. Even the Rockets and Jazz have less than 10 losses in those games. So strength of schedule for the Pacers doesn't matter. They can lose to anybody. They've also beaten anybody, right? So toss that out the window completely. But it's still relevant for other teams who have more normal results. For example, the Magic have cleaned up 23-6 against crummy teams. That's part of why they're in 5th, right? The Heat have been a little more all over the map, and they've been inconsistent this season. But the Heat, who just got Denver done tonight, have the second easiest schedule in the league the rest of the way. Their hardest opponent by record is Cleveland the rest of the way, but they still have a lot of easy games, including Washington, Detroit twice, and Portland to close out the season. Orlando's getting a lot of their easy games done. They're up to 25th now in terms of strength of schedule. They have some tough games, but they still have a good bankment of easy games. They have a lot of home games coming up. So again, catching those teams will be hard because of their schedule. The Pacers' strength of schedule might matter less. They're finally getting down to, the bottom half in terms of easiness, but it doesn't matter. I'm not talking about their strength of schedule anymore. It is an irrelevant statistic for the Pacers. They can beat anybody and they can lose to anybody. So it's kind of hard to look at that specifically. That said, a keynote, the Knicks have a pretty easy schedule. The Sixers have a moderately harder schedule the rest of the way. Theirs and the Pacers about the same. So I think the Pacers, as it stands, no Joel Embiid, are better than the Philadelphia 76ers. The question is, can they keep up or catch up to one of the other 3 teams and remain in 6th, or are they going to be in the play-in tournament? We'll keep up with standings watch every single week, but we cannot bury the opposite direction of this just yet. Pacers just lost to the Bulls, meaning the tiebreaker with Chicago is still hanging in the balance, and quietly, the Bulls, sneaking up on people here. They're 7-3 in overtime. They're playing great in the clutch of late, and they're 3.5 games behind the Bulls now for the last spot in the 7-8 game, 4.5 behind the Pacers. That's not over, right? The Bulls could get to 500. I think I'll do the percentages math next week in terms of what I think the numbers are going to be for each seed. The Bulls are not out of it to me in terms of getting to 7th or 8th. The Pacers have to think about that, and the Bulls just beat them. Had they won this game, it looked very likely that the Bulls would have held on ahead of the Pacers would have held on ahead of the Bulls, but they lost. It's a relevant thing to think about now. The rest of the way, it seems like the Pacers are securely ahead of the Hawks, and they're pretty close to clinching a play-in spot in general. In fact, I think if they beat Brooklyn, if they sweep the Nets this season, if they beat the Nets twice this season, no, they have to sweep them. If they sweep the Nets this season, they have 3 games against them. They will clinch a play-in spot for sure. But the key standing thing to note is they still have to think about 9. They hope they can get ahead of the Sixers. All these teams are a jumbled mess, 6-4, 5-5, 4-6 in their last 10 games, except the Magic, who are just rocking through an easy schedule. And the Magic are the only team that have clinched the tiebreaker over the Pacers, and they're probably going to have the elusive win the Southeast Division tiebreaker, right? That could actually work in the Pacers' favor, that the only team that could have that division tiebreaker over the Pacers is also a team that has the head-to-head. So I think the Pacers will care about the head-to-head. They need to beat the Heat in April when they play. They don't play any of these teams besides them again. And as it stands, the Pacers are chasing a playoff spot, currently in 7th. We'll update this again next week at the most convenient time, probably midweek, so it makes sense to keep going about midweek. But they need some wins. They need to get some wins under their belt. They've done well against good teams. They have not done well against bad teams. And tonight, they lost again to a team with an inferior record. Their late game play, some odd decisions, some tough moments, and losing the odds battle cost them. DeRozan was unbelievable. And I'm sure I said something stupid because I went the math route this time. I hope you had a calculator or an abacus or something to keep up. So if I did, either comment below if you're watching on YouTube or tweet at me at Tony R. East on Twitter. The show is at Lockdown Pacers. That's what I think about this Pacers loss, where I think about where they are in the standings and their hope for their final, can't do math quick enough, 15 games of the season. Plenty more to come on Lockdown Pacers tomorrow. We're talking Pascal Siakam, the Pacers in the month since trading away Buddy Hield, and Jarris Walker with Caitlin Cooper. It's going to be awesome. We're going to dive in to some big topics around the new look, air quotes, because it's been months, Pacers as they push in for their stretch run. Hope you all enjoyed today's show. Till then, have a wonderful day.